Good morning. Welcome to another edition of the Willie Bragg Show. I hope everybody's doing very well today. I was a little too tired to do anything yesterday, although I wanted to do some video. So I'm up for the energy right now. So we'll start with some music, and then we will start with some commentary. So introduction to the music, and we'll start from there and take it where it goes. All righty. Let it begin. Good morning to you all. It's morning. Anyway, as I said, today we're going to focus on some optimistic and happy news instead of the grim news about what's going on between Russia and Ukraine, which is a horrible and disastrous and criminal in itself for all sides involved, Russians, Ukrainians, NATO, the United States. The only good people there are the citizens of all these countries who are unfortunate enough to have the leaders doing the things that they do. And unfortunately, that's the cards that we're all dealt with. We have to deal with our politicians here in the United States. All the NATO countries have to deal with their politicians. Russia's got to deal with their politicians, and the Ukrainians got to deal with their politicians, and the people themselves and all of these societies have to suffer. But we're also not going to deal with Middle Eastern politics today either, thankfully. And again, everybody is in an unfortunate situation over there. No matter which country you're in and what side of the squabble or what side of the conflict you reside on, everybody is a victim involved, and and it's all unfortunate, all perpetuated by pretty much everybody, whether we're talking about the United States and Israel causing a lot of shit, or the actual jihadis on the other side causing the shit. Everybody's at fault on that issue. But let's go and talk about down under, Australia, where the happy news is actually at. On May 21st, there was an election, a federal election in Australia. And the former, now I can call him the former Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, of his Liberal National Coalition government. And for Americans, I know this is going to be a little bit confusing because the term liberal means usually center left or center in the Western world. But in Australia, liberal means conservative. And so the Australian ruling Liberal Party, which is their conservative party, who's been ruling Australia for close to a decade in coalition with the National Party, were defeated the other day by the Australian Labor Party, which I'm not sure, but it looks like it's going to be a majority-minority coalition, a minority government. That meaning that it looks like it's going to be a coalition with the Labor Party and the Greens and some independent parties. That's what it's looking like right now. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to play you the video that some BBC coverage. They can pretty much tell you about the election a little bit better than I can. So they get the cool British accent and all of that. So you get to hear it from their perspective. A British accent's much cooler than my accent. So we'll hear it from them, and I will comment even further afterwards. Hold tight, hold tight, hold tight. Okay, yeah. Here we go.
Begin in Australia, where it appears the Labour Party will form Australia's new government. It's still not clear whether it will be a majority administration or a coalition with minor parties such as the Greens, who have done well. It means the end of the leadership of Scott Morrison, and Anthony Albanese will be crowned Australia's Prime Minister. A few moments ago, Scott Morrison conceded.
And so on a night like tonight, it is proper to acknowledge the functioning of our democracy. I've always believed in Australians and their judgment, and I've always been prepared to accept their verdicts. And tonight they have delivered their verdict, and I congratulate Anthony Albanese and the Labor Party, and I wish him and his government all the very best.
Scott Morrison, let's go live to Sydney to our correspondent Shaima Khalil, who's at the Opposition Labour event. Have we heard from Anthony Albanese yet?
No, we're expecting Anthony Albanese, Australia's new Prime Minister, to come in through those doors any minute now. There is a bit of a kerfuffle here. You can see from the cameras that they're ready for something to happen through that door. So we're thinking that he's coming this way. When he does, we'll turn that way. A humbling night, a difficult night for Labour, a jubilant night. A humbling night for Liberals and a jubilant night for Labour. After 9 years with the Liberal Party in power, Scott Morrison just conceded defeat He said that he has accepted Australia's verdict and that he has congratulated and conceded his defeat to Anthony Albanese. Mr. Albanese will now be forming the new government for Australia. It is still unclear whether this is going to be a majority government or a minority government, but the likely allies in this coalition, if it happens, will be the independents. They really have been the story of this election. Yes, Labour has done well, I think better than they thought that they would, but really the female independent candidates in this election have done better than anybody has thought. And it's very, very symbolic in a country where politics is seen as a toxic environment for women. Women independent candidates defeated male candidates in safe government seats. Women have turned their back on the Liberals, and now Liberals will have to sit and think about what has gone wrong for them. In the meantime, Labour supporters are celebrating. They're saying that this has been a long time coming. They've been waiting for it. Anthony Albanese, throughout the election, has told voters, has told Australians that it is now time for a change. They have listened, but he now has to deliver, because there's an array of issues really that Australia and the government need to get on fairly quickly, I have to say.
With the teal candidates, these female candidates, what changes do we expect in terms of climate policy?
I think this is really the change that we can expect. The climate will be at the forefront of policies now. I don't think that this government, especially if it teams up with Teal Independents, that have had climate action at the center of their campaigning, at the center of their policies, they can no longer just hint to it. They can no longer speak shyly about it. Remember, Labour does have ambitious climate policies. Last election, though, they've learned the hard way that if you campaign on phasing out fossil fuels, you lose the elections. So they have steered clear away from it during the campaigning, but I think there will be much stronger now that they are in government. How strong and how aggressive they're going to go for phasing out fossil fuels, this will be coming clear. But I think climate policy can no longer be avoided, especially if we get a coalition government of Labour and those Teal Independents.
You mentioned how aggressive they can and will be. It's interesting, isn't it? Because a lot of people are saying that Scott Morrison, this election really was a referendum on him for his really quite aggressive steamroller political style.
Look, I think there are many moments that you can say things have gone wrong for Scott Morrison. I'm just aware that there's a bit of movement, so if Anthony Albanese appears, we'll let you know. But Scott Morrison has conceded, if you will, at the very end of the campaign, that he is a bit of a bulldozer, that he is aggressive, and maybe he should have been a more sensitive candidate, and that maybe he should change. And you could tell that he felt that people were just not responding. You could tell that he felt that people just do not like what they see anymore. But I think also there was a big misstep, for example, in the way that he handled women issues. There was a moment of reckoning about a year ago when there was a great anger among women about sex misconduct allegations, rape allegations in the House of Parliament, and he was seen as just not empathetic. He said that I should handle this like a father, and many asked, well, why do you need to be a father to handle this? You needed to handle this like a leader. So women and the way that they've reacted to the Liberal government is actually a big story here. But of course, as well, his backing of the fossil fuel industry, his refusing to outright say that he will phase out fossil fuels. And so I think climate-aware voters are wanting a change. People that I'm speaking to here are saying now that this government is in place, they need to do something about climate action.
Okay, Shaima, for now, thank you very much indeed.
Okay, righty. Well, let me see what we can add to this discussion. And basically, as I said, well, correction. I was told earlier Greens, but apparently there'll be independents, some independents in the coalition too. So there is that as well. And the thing about it is that Australia shifting back toward the left. Australia is probably in the Western world. The United States is probably the most conservative country in the Western world. And Australia, from what I can tell, might be probably, I would say, probably a pretty damn close second in many ways. I mean, it was one of the last countries in the Western world, like, for example, on social issues, to legalize same-sex marriage, that sort of thing. They're almost kind of like, in my opinion, Australia seems like a cross between. They seem like a cross between Great Britain and a more left-wing mindset, with a combination of the United States and a kind of a more right-wing mindset, and like the two political cultures kind of combined. That's how Australia kind of strikes me. And I know that might sound a little odd to most of you, or some of you maybe, but that's just how it just appears to me. But suffice to say that with the new prime minister, they got some work they need to do. A decade ago, the conservative government, which is the liberal national government, went and did things kind of like did some things screwy, like did some major privatization to a Medibank, which basically kind of turned their single payer system, which was created by Go Whitlam in the 1970s, kind of turned it more or less into something that's just almost indistinguishable from what the Affordable Care Act is in the United States. Like something like a little bit better than the Affordable Care Act. It's basically like a more public Obamacare is what the Australian system kind of degenerated into. And I hope that the new Labour government, the new Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, will go and revitalize their national healthcare system and put more teeth and make it public again, make it truly public, and do to it. Ideally, make it like the National Health Service, which I don't think they're going to do, but at least go toward the Canadian direction, and try to phase out the smaller insurance companies and private insurance schemes that exist in those countries in Australia, because that's just disastrous. I mean, to try to do that sort of thing. I mean, it's a disaster to have private health insurance here, and for another country to look at the United States and think this is the model that works. So, I mean, would I prefer their imperfect, botched up Medibank to what we have here? Yes, but it's still a disgrace what they did to it, because of what the national government, the national liberal government did a decade ago to try to appease their medical industrial complex. So anyway, that's one of the things. Apparently, what makes Anthony Albanese a little bit unique is that he is a Republican. Small, lowercase r. I don't want to confuse anybody. But if you live in the Anglosphere other than in America, if you're a Republican, let's say in Ireland, or if you're a Republican in Australia or any of the Commonwealth in the countries, where your country recognizes the crown, basically you're wanting your country to be a republic and divorce yourself from recognizing the royal family in the UK, recognizing Queen Elizabeth, basically. Not necessarily telling Queen Elizabeth to fuck off, but you don't want your country to recognize, have Queen Elizabeth recognized as queen of your country. And so that's kind of a unique aspect of Anthony Albanese. But I don't know where is the modern Australian Labor Party. I know that in the 1990s, the Australian Labor Party sort of went into a third way direction, prior to what Tony Blair was doing in the late 1990s, which was insufferable under the Paul Keating government. The Australian Labor Party just went through kind of a very conservative period, and I'm hoping that they moved away from that. But the fact that the Liberal Party in Australia is pretty right wing. And you know, are they as right wing as the Republicans? Probably not. They're, you know, probably. Well, I would say they're probably not, because I've talked to Australian conservatives, and they would prefer their healthcare system, for example, to the Americans. They think we're crazy for having it, even though they kind of botched up their own healthcare system. But so I would speculate that even the Australian Labor Party now is to the left of the Democrats here in the United States. And so, you know, just all about perspective. But let's go and take a walk down memory lane. And because I'm running short on time here. And I'm going to play a kind of a well-known ad, in a campaign ad in 1972. Well known in Australia, not really here, for Go Whitlam. And this ad was kind of well known because it helped him become Prime Minister of Australia. And by 1975, Australia would end up having their actual single payer system that unfortunately got undermined later on. But this was the election where this commercial, you know, was very successful, and apparently it did help in the polls for Go Whitlam. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, but you know, anyway, he was a very good prime minister, one of my favorites in Australia as far as Australian prime ministers are concerned. So I hope you enjoy. I'll play it right now, and then I'll conclude with some final words.
Time for moving, it's time to begin. Yes, it's time. Time for old folks, time for loving. It's time to give. Yes, it's time. Time for children, time to teach them. It's time it was free. Yes, it's time. Time for loving, time for giving. It's time to move. Yes, it's time. Time for love. Days to be here. It's time to move. Yes, it's time. Time for freedom. Time for moving. It's time to begin. Yes, it's time. Time for romance. Time for London. It's time to dare. Yes, it's time. Time for children. Time to teach them. It's time it was free. It's time. Time for loving. Time for giving. It's time to move. Yes, it's time. Time is here now. Time for better ways. Yes, it's time.
Authorised M. Young, Ainsley Avenue, Canberra, for the Australian Labor Party.
I love that commercial. I mean, you know, I was 3 years old. Actually, in 1972, I was 3 years old living in Puerto Rico with my parents. I mean, that time, I mean, they didn't give a shit what's going on in Australia. I know I wasn't giving a shit what was going on in Australia in 1972. I didn't even know what the fuck Australia was. I didn't even know what the fuck Puerto Rico was in 1972. But, I mean, I was 3 years old. I mean, all I knew was what a 3-year-old dumbass kid would know at 3 years old. I mean, so and I do remember certain little cultural things in the early 70s. I recognized seeing Richard Nixon on TV. I recognized that. I didn't know it was Richard Nixon, but looking back, I recognized things like that. I remember seeing All in the Family on TV in 1972. I mean, I remember things of that nature. Ironside, some of these TV shows from back then, But remember the big old Ford LTD, the black Ford LTD that we would ride in at that time. I mean, things like that. We were living outside of Ponce, Salinas, and all that. But do I remember Australia at the age of 3? I mean, I would have been one hell of a nerdy kid. I did end up turning nerdy later on. I don't tell anybody, but I ended up turning nerdy later on. It's our secret. Anyway, suffice to say that commercial was from 1972, and just kind of it was kind of like it was kind of like Go Whitland's attempt to be kind of hip and happening, and kind of they wanted to be kind of swinging and all of that, so that's why they were playing that kind of a jingle of "It's Time" and all of that. So and there it was, and it helped him become prime minister. And I don't know. I don't exactly remember what happened, but he had to step down, I believe, in 1976. I think it was in 1976 he had to step down. But suffice to say that Australia, did move forward, and even though they're probably the second most socially conservative country in the Western world, when you compare them beside the United States, they're so far ahead of us. I mean, their unions are still stronger than we are. They have more unions than we do. They still have a universal healthcare system. We don't. I mean, for Christ's sake, they don't have a death penalty, and we still have capital punishment. I mean, as soon as their government got elected, I forgot who was Kevin Rudd in 2007. I think it was in 2007 it got elected. Yep. And what did they do? They pulled the troops out of Iraq. It was a great way to take a shit on George W. Bush, and I loved it. Just as Prime Minister Zapatero did in Spain in 2004. That was the best part of 2004. And I think I'll go talk about Spain 2004 in a future commentary, because I got some stuff to share about that, and I'm ranting on and all. So what else would you expect me to do? Anyway, if you like what you heard, press like and comment. If you disagree, comment anyway. We'll have a conversation. Feel free to share the content on this channel. As a First Amendment absolutist, it's my duty to inform you to create your own platform and utilize it, because we're the muckrakers of our time. Subscribe to this channel, hit that notification bell, and remember, we have a class struggle to wage. We have because there's no war like a class war. Remember that. We have a lot of work to do. We have a First Amendment to save. That means we have to defend freedom of speech at all costs, and we have to defend the freedom of the press, which brings me to this final point. Like I always say at this, during these commentaries these days, and we're all Julian Assange, where I conclude and tell you all this. And you know what I'm going to say after I say that we're all Julian Assange, because we are. I will say, music.